Greetings, my fellow Americans. Today I had an entirely different topic set aside that I was going to do. I was going to talk about dotting I's and crossing T's and drawing lines between some of the subjects in my previous podcast because the question had been posited what my point was. I thought my point had been clear, but I'm going to go ahead and do a podcast next that deals with that. But something happened in my personal life today that raised the issue of the importance of misinformation. So today I'm going to work on the subject of misinformation as my topic rather than the one I had originally planned. So the next episode will be dotting the I's, crossing the T's, bringing you some connectivity to some of the topics I've already talked about on this podcast. But today I'm going to work on the subject of misinformation. Misinformation, oftentimes called propaganda, is where somebody specifically spreads information that serves a specific purpose or target, an agenda, if you will, but it doesn't necessarily have to be true, and most times it's not. One of my favorite sayings is that the truth is not the truth just because someone says it is. And then you have other quotes along the lines of a lie is far easier to believe than the truth because it can be molded to the ear of the listener. Truth, by comparison, is far more rigid and less likely to be believed. And when it comes to misinformation or propaganda or whatever method you want to use it to, it's true. People tend to think the negative is true before they think the positive is. I was on a conversation with my grandmother in Kansas, and just for anybody who doesn't understand the geography involved here, I'm in Montana, Kalispell, Montana, which is northwest Montana, about as far north in the United States as you can get. My grandma lives in Plainville, Kansas. That is literally 1,258 miles away from me. To get there, I have to cross two other states. That would be Wyoming, the better part of Wyoming, a good chunk of about 2/3 of Nebraska, and then I'm in Kansas. And that's after passing through the majority of Montana to get to those two states to make that transition. Over 1,000 miles away. I have not been to my hometown. This is where I was born, Plainville, Kansas. I have not been to my hometown since I was 20. Since 1990 was the last time I was there. And so I don't know anybody who lives there except my grandma. Due to the circumstances of what happened here, and this misinformation aspect relates directly to that, I lost contact with most of my family. My family doesn't want to talk to me because of misinformation spread by the police while investigating my case. While I was sitting 16 months in jail waiting for a trial, I had police officers contacting relatives all over the country, in Colorado and Kansas and California, trying to dig up dirt about me. Now keep in mind the insanity of this prospect. They were so uncertain about their prosecution that they were looking to other states and past history that would be completely inadmissible because it would be in other jurisdictions. They just wanted dirt. They didn't care. They wanted to be able to malign my character. They didn't want facts. They didn't want any kind of true details. They wanted something to malign my character so they could sit there and say, well, here's proof that he's did this because look at all these allegations from all these other places he's lived and all these other relatives who know him. 90% of the relatives didn't know me well enough to even make a statement because most of them had known me as a child, not as an adult. As I said, I had not been back there since 1990, and this happened in 2003. So as you can understand, there was over a decade involved since I had last seen any of my relatives in Kansas or had much contact with them other than, holiday cards. Might have made a couple phone calls here and there, but for the most part, I didn't really talk to my family in Kansas. We weren't really that close-knit. So when 2003 rolled around and the prosecutors knew this was a bogus claim, they knew it was fake, they knew it was made up, so they were trying to find something that would give it credibility, back it up. And so they were calling around all over Kansas, all over Colorado, all over California, trying to find anybody who could give them dirt, anybody who could tell them anything. And Of course, in the consequence of doing so, they proceeded to tell the most horrific lies to my family. They told them that not only had I molested my alleged victim, but I was a serial child rapist, that I was a person who had been molesting children for decades and getting away with it, and this was the one chance to stop me. This is the kind of things they were telling them. There's absolutely no proof to this. It didn't exist. None of it existed. They didn't have to have it exist. It didn't need to exist. They just had to say it to try to manipulate and twist my own family to say something negative about me. And the consequence, they cost me the support of my entire family. My family doesn't want anything to do with me. Why? Not because of anything true, but because of what was said by these police officers who had nothing to do but try to malign me and try to find some way to get my family members to divulge something negative they could use, something they could back up this ridiculous claim they knew wasn't true. They made it up. The alleged victim told 5 different versions of the story by the time it went to trial, and then the prosecution threw a 6th version on top of it that they hadn't even checked with her in advance. Misinformation. They didn't have to tell the truth, and that's the whole point here. And this is the whole crux of why this is on the Great Montana Conspiracy, because, and this is not just consistent with Montana. This is true about the United States as a whole. It is illegal. It is a crime for a common citizen to lie to the government, whether it be to police officers, the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, for those of you who are outside the United States. Anything. You lie to the government, it's a crime. You can go to jail for lying to the government. There is not a single law on the books that makes it illegal for the government to lie to you or to lie to anybody. You tell a lie to government, crime, possible prison time. Government officials lie to you, no consequence. I'm kind of reminded of a Friends episode where Phoebe and Joey are running a contest between the chick and the duck, and they're looking for a nutter butter, and so they let the animals out, and Joey's, of course, the judge of the contest, and Phoebe accepts his rulings no matter how ridiculous. It's like, oh, he puts a foot in front of Phoebe's chick and says, and Phoebe's like, oh, foul, judge, and Joey says, judge rules, no violation. Of course, he's not going to rule against himself, and that's what I get here. It's like the government says, oh, you know what, you did something wrong to me, definitely a crime. Let's go to jail. Let's prosecute you. Let's do all these terrible and awful things to you because you lied to me. But no foul, I did it. No foul. And that's really what we deal with. The greatest weapon used by corrupt governments, organizations, anybody, is to tell lies, to use propaganda. Despots and tyrants use it. Hitler was a well-known propagandist. In fact, he's well known for a quote that said, propaganda is a truly terrible weapon in the hands of an expert. He said that in 1924, long before he was elected to power. But you can tell this is a man who had said this, who had planned this, who had plotted an entire career, overtook a government, tried to take over the world with propaganda. Propaganda are lies. Propaganda are mistruths. And oftentimes, propaganda is partial truths, but leaving out really critical details. I mean, bottom line, propaganda uses truths, half-truths, and lies to manipulate circumstances and situations to get you to think the way the propagandist, the person who's telling this lie, wants you to. Typically, it omits select information that takes away from their case, and they'll add information that helps their case. Oftentimes, it simplifies complex issues, things that have a much broader context. They'll narrow it down to something, a bullet point, something they can get across. Not to be political or try to raise issues of anti-Trumpism or anything like that. But for instance, a perfect example of propaganda was when former President Trump called the coronavirus the Kung flu. He was trying to relate it to a flu virus because it's sick, it has many of the same symptoms, therefore let's call it a flu virus. Let's simplify the message. We'll call it Kung flu. That's propaganda, ladies and gentlemen. Regardless of whether you believe that or not, That is propaganda at its core. That is taking a very complex issue, simplifying it into one quick little term, a very offensive and derogatory term, I might add. I in no way endorse it. I in no way either the racial undertones or the oversimplification or the misclassification of a deadly plague being called a simple flu virus. Okay, so these propaganda, it plays on your emotions, it plays on prejudices, it preys on biases, it preys on your right, your desire to do right as much as it preys upon your desire to do wrong. I mean, when I ran my youth recreations program, I'll admit it, I would often tell people where there's smoke, there's fire. Children don't make up stories like this. If a child comes to me and says, I'm being abused at home, I'm going to champion that child and I'm going to charge forward and I'm going to make sure that child is protected. Because that's what I genuinely believed. That's an emotional reaction, a desire to protect and shelter children, the most vulnerable members of our population. But that's just propaganda playing into it because I'd heard those expressions, I'd heard that concept, I'd heard that idea that children don't make these things up, that where there's smoke, there must be fire. I'd heard these. I'd grown up hearing these things. So the bias and the prejudice was there in me because I didn't know not to think them. And now I've gone through the experience and I understand. Absolutely, children lie. I mean, I don't even know why that even didn't occur to me. Children lie. They do. They absolutely lie. And they don't have any subjects that are off limits about lying. I mean, I've known children who tell the most fantastical stories about going out back and dancing with unicorns. And they'll be absolutely sincere in telling you this story. Oh, I went to the house and I found an elf colony. I found dwarves under there digging for gold. Just kids will make up the most fantastical stories. And the problem is that children will also do whatever an adult tells them to do because they're conditioned to listen to people in positions of authority. They are conditioned to do what they are told to do because they are punished if they don't listen to adults. They are raised around an authoritarian idea that adults are superior, adults are right. They don't have the ability to discriminate or disseminate that kind of difference between whether an adult is lying to them or an adult is telling the truth to them. So if an adult tells them to lie, they will lie because the adult told them to do so. Oh, you can't tell mommy this. Don't tell mommy this. If daddy asks, say this. So they do that because that's what they were told to do. So why would they think that that sexual content, sexual subject, which children do not understand, is something they would be, I'm not going to lie about that. They're going to say things they overhear. They're going to say things they're told to say. They're going to say things that they know will get them something out of trouble, possibly, get them some kind of a benefit, possibly. Children have all kinds of a plethora of motivations for lying. So when you're told children don't lie about these kinds of things, it was propaganda fed into my head, and I believed it. And now I know not to believe it, but there it is. But propaganda, it advertises a cause. It attacks people. It finds weak people or unprotected or underprivileged people, or it finds people who are disenfranchised, who are not liked by people, by other people. Like you have, like in World War II, Hitler was relying upon the fact that the majority of Germans that backed his cause believed that Jews were responsible for the Great Depression. It wasn't true, just because Jewish people were oftentimes wealthier, not always, is a stereotype, not always, but many times wealthier citizens were Jewish. Somehow that became a disenfranchising element in saying, okay, they are responsible for us being poor, they're rich, they must be responsible. Prejudice, bigotry, bias. Preyed on that emotion. But in attacking these audiences that the propagandist wants to attack, they gain power either by removing opponents or simply gaining influence. In my case, propaganda was used to get rid of an opponent. I was somebody who was suing the city of Kalispell. I had identified misconduct by the police department, making sexual and physical assaults upon teenagers. I was trying to organize those kids to make statements against the police. I was a threat. Absolutely, I was a threat. And they had to get rid of me. And the easiest way was to simply throw out an accusation that did not need a whole lot of proof. That was it. And they thought that by doing that, by kidnapping my stepdaughters and taking them away from me, and they would barrel me down and say, he's going to give up because we're threatening him with this allegation, we're taking his family away, we're doing all these terrible things to him. Eventually he's going to give up just so he can, it's going to cost him too much. And my sense of justice and my sense of right and wrong was too great, and I honestly was naive. I was naive. Plain and simple, I was naive. I believed that they couldn't do this to me. I believed honesty and integrity and justice would prevail. But that's what propaganda does. And the whole reason that this whole thing got brought up today was I was calling my grandma, and I started this conversation and got off on an entirely different tangent. But I called my grandma. I check on her. She's 94 years old. She lives by herself. Grandpa's passed. She's my last surviving grandparent. She's one of the few members of my family who actually was talking to me. My Aunt Shirley will talk to me when I need to convey information to my grandma. Otherwise, my Aunt Shirley doesn't really talk to me either. My brother Mike and I, rocky relationship. We're currently talking. That could change next week. My mom and I don't talk. I don't talk to my dad. I don't talk to my uncles, my aunts, my cousins. The only relationship I have that I have any type of a long-standing, good relationship with is my grandmother. And like I said, she's 94 years old. She's frail. She's ailing. I don't mean to speak ill of anybody, but 94 years old, she's not much longer for this life. When she's gone, I probably will have no family that I can actually speak to that will actually listen or care about what I'm going through. So she's a very important person to me in my life. And she tells me today, she asks me if I'm calling girls in Plainville making rude, sexual, lascivious calls, dirty calls to girls in Plainville, Kansas. Because somebody realized I have family in Plainville, Kansas. And either they are calling girls in Plainville, saying they're me, or they're starting a story about it somewhere, but the story got back to my grandma. And my grandma, it got back to me. Now, there's part of my mind thinks trying to understand or reason why someone would go to the trouble of trying to convince people in Plainville, Kansas, 1,200 miles away from me, 1,258 miles, I looked it up, 1,258 miles away from where I'm at right now. It's so important to convince people in that town that I'm doing something ridiculous of this nature. I mean, why would I? It makes absolutely no sense to me. Why would I? Why would anybody call up girls 1,200 miles away randomly and just start making dirty phone calls? I mean, maybe if someone was a pervert and was trying to find somebody to hook up with, in some way or another, I could maybe reason it. I wouldn't do it. That's not my character. It's not who I am. But maybe I could see a reason for that. But I am trapped in Montana, and I will be at least for another 2.5 years, assuming they don't extend my time. They've tried twice already. I have every expectation and belief that these podcasts are going to instigate another revocation attempt. They're either going to take something out of context, or they don't like the fact I'm out here speaking. And bam, that's going to be it. That's going to slam down, and they're going to come after me with some stupid made-up thing again and try to put me back in prison for 15 years. Which means no more podcasts, no more information, and I'm once again political prisoner, actually in prison. I'm a political prisoner because my liberties are restrained. I cannot leave Montana. I cannot leave the state. I can't travel. I have somebody who wants me to visit in Idaho. I have my grandmother who wants me to come visit her in Kansas before she passes away. They won't let me go. Different excuses have been raised. I don't give them enough time. They're fearful that I'm a flight risk, that I'm going to leave the state and not return. They're all excuses. They're excuses because I won't confess, I won't bend the knee, I won't submit to their corrupt authority, and I continue to speak. So they do what they can within the boundaries of what they're allowed to do and say, well, it's justified. I applied for early release a couple years ago. And actually, it was about 6 months before the coronavirus hit. So it was about a couple years ago. And keep in mind, model probationer. No new crimes, no new violations, no new anything. The one thing they got me a write-up on, supposedly, was when I published my original book, and I missed one place where my alleged victim's name appeared in a police report. Her first name. No other context. Just one place out of a several hundred-page book. Her first name appeared one way. No way to identify her. You can't track someone down by their first name. It's just, unless you want to sit here and meticulously go through every single person in the United States with that first name, or possibly the world, because who knows where she lives now. But the idea being, you're not going to track someone down by their first name. There's no way you're going to look at it and identify it, unless you had personal knowledge. And if you had personal knowledge, you wouldn't need her name. You'd know her. You'd know who she is. So it made no point. But it was an excuse and a justification to go ahead and try to attack me. It's what they tried the second verification attempt on. But that's the only thing that they were ever able to in the entire time between my release in 2009. There are multiple attempts to violate me. There are multiple attempts to try to increase my conditions, to modify my conditions, to make it impossible for me to exist out here without being revoked. And here I am. I'm still out here. Not for their best effort of trying, but I'm still out here. But I have every expectation to believe that they're going to do something, or they're going to try something in the next couple of years to put me back, because they can't, in 2.5 years, on February 8th, I think it's February 18th of 2024, if they do nothing, I walk out of Montana. And they know this. And that's the only reason I can think of why they would start this malicious rumor in Plainville, Kansas. Because they know that in 2.5 years, if they are not successful in returning me to prison through some made-up artifice, that I'm probably going to go to Kansas. Because that's where my hometown is. That's where my family is. The only remaining family I have, really, is there. And anybody who knows that must realize that I'm going to come back there. Because it's really the only place they can conceivably think I might go. So, the only thing I have to think of is they're laying groundwork to undermine my character in that community before I can go there. So I won't be welcome there. So I'll be driven out of there. And guess what? It probably is going to be successful, because I don't know who's doing this. I can't stop them. I have no way to stop them. When you have, and this goes to another issue I've talked about on my blog. And once again, my blog is monspiracy.wordpress.com. So if you ever want to go back and read my original posts, and when I talk about my blog, you're more than welcome to. It's still online, still up. I haven't been writing there for years because of the threat and the fear of retaliation. And I'm going all over the place today, and I apologize. I realize this because I need to go back to the subject of my attempt to get free for early release. Under Montana law, once you've served half of your time on probation, you can apply for early release, or 2/3, or I don't remember. At any rate, I became eligible for early release, and so I went ahead and applied for it. I made the application. I went through the process. Of course, they turned me down. Of course, model citizen, model probationer, no violations, no 2 revocation attempts, both failed. So they've got nothing on me. They've gone back and modified my conditions. They still can't find a reason or justification to throw me in prison. I'm a law-abiding citizen, ladies and gentlemen. I always have been. And I'm a for lack of a better word, I'm a rules monger. I follow rules. I don't even like these rules, but I follow them. Just yesterday, I told someone they couldn't have alcohol in my house. Just last week, I told somebody I can't go to the bar with them. I follow the rules. I don't like the rules. I think they're completely inappropriate, but I follow them. And they know I follow them. I don't do drugs. I don't do alcohol. I don't even smoke. So they have nothing they can really get me on within the rules. So they'll make something up. In this case, the way Montana, and this is, and I can't speak for this being in any other state. I actually have tried to look for other states and try to find guidelines, and I haven't been able to find these guidelines anywhere else. So I don't know whether they only exist in Montana or whether they exist in other states and I just simply can't find them. And by all means, if somebody's hearing this and they can match this example somewhere else, please let me know, and I'll gladly amend this in a later podcast and explain that this information was brought to my attention and this clarifies it. But as far as I know, this is only a practice in Montana. When a sexual or violent offender is up for early release, they contact the victims in the case, and the victims are allowed to decide whether or not the person can be released. Now, you can imagine, I mean, I'm not talking about they get to put their input in, they get to decide. If they object at all, if they don't want the offender released, the person is not released. Period. No such thing as rehabilitation. No such thing as, getting off for good time or in any manner, shape, or form, any reward for good behavior. None. Zero. If your alleged victim says, I don't want him or her released, you are not released, because those are the rules of probation. The rules of probation will only let you out on early release as a violent or sexual offender if the victim agrees to your release. They're not. Now, keep in mind, I'll lay the odds are probably close to 99%. These alleged victims, true victims, fake victims, and there are absolutely true victims, and I'm not trying to minimize true victims of crimes here when I say this. They're probably not legal professionals. They're probably not law enforcement. They probably have no judicial record or law enforcement record of any kind in their past. They're simply people. Common people who have no background or experience, and certainly no expertise on whether someone has been rehabilitated. They're simply asked, do you want them to be released? And they're not. Now, keep in mind, the process requires the victims to make a statement, submit this statement into record of the probationer's record to indicate this is the reason why, because the victim objects to their release. However, in my case, they always make exceptions. They don't have a statement from my alleged victim. They have had no contact with my alleged victim. I'm not even sure if they know where my alleged victim is. But it seems pretty obvious that she doesn't object to my release. She's not involved in this in any manner, shape, or form. However, my ex, her mother, Mara, she absolutely objects because I've been trying to sue her for the business assets of mine she stole when I went to prison. And I've been trying to get that lawsuit literally since 2007. The court will not set a trial date. They don't want me to put the information in front of a jury where I can prove that Mara stole hundreds of thousands of dollars in business assets. I have the Secretary of State records, and I once again refer you to my blog where I actually have those documents scanned and online. There's no defense against it. The business was in my name. It was my business. We had a separate partnership agreement that said she was entitled to 50%, which she will not produce. Keep in mind, I went to prison, therefore I had no access to my business records. Okay? So she took all the business records, she took all the contracts, the invoices, the everything. She took them. Now, rumor says that at one point in time she had them in storage. Don't know if she still does. She could, I don't know. I have no current information on that because the case has not been allowed to go to trial. The court won't even grant a discovery schedule. Will not grant. I've tried to issue discovery on her, and the court has told me basically I'm harassing her. She actually filed a restraining order because I tried to file discovery on her. I mean, and she's never been compelled to respond to anything. But because she's being sued for, at this point in time, interest bears the balance of that debt over $1 million, because that's how long the interest has been bearing on this case. They don't want her to have this ruling against her. She doesn't want to have the ruling against her. So her made objection to my release from custody. Conflict of interest, of course. Not the victim. Family member of, but not the victim. Yet she's allowed to go ahead and make the objection on the victim's behalf. So I wasn't allowed to be released. So, all because she comes and says she's terrified, she's worried, blah, 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 blah. Misinformation. Propaganda. And it's allowed. It's allowed because the government's benefit here is that I'm not released. This is their excuse. This is their justification. It's allowed. While in jail, originally, back in 2004, there were people from the government who were going around, and I say the government because the only people I can think of at that point in time who had any motivation or reason to do this were making phone calls to Mara's cell phone. Now keep in mind, when I got arrested, neither one of us had cell phones. 2003. Cell phones were on the upswing, but neither one of us had cell phones. I didn't know she had a cell phone. I was in jail for 1.5 years, 16 months, before I saw a trial. I didn't know she had a cell phone, much less knew her cell phone number. And at that time, you couldn't make phone calls to cell phones because the only way to call out of the jail was collect, and cell phones couldn't take collect calls. So there was no way for me to have ever possibly made these phone calls. But someone was calling around threatening Mara, telling her I was going to kill her, I was going to hurt her, I was going to do these terrible, vicious things to her. She needed to do this, she needed to do that, or I was going to hurt her. And she was actually telling people that she was worried about her health and her welfare because people were calling her and threatening her on her phone, which I did not have access to. I didn't even know. And the irony is, and here's the real kicker, ladies and gentlemen, it wasn't until after her interview with the police department where she gave her cell phone number to the police that she started receiving these calls. Dot your I's, cross your T's, ladies and gentlemen. There it is. But nevertheless, misinformation was used, malignment was used, and allowed because it's the police, it's law enforcement, it's government. They're allowed to do this. There's no crime against it. While I was doing book signings, up until the time that the coronavirus prevented public gatherings, I was doing book signings at the local mall. Mara instigated one of her coworkers from the hospital to start a thread on Facebook. Now remember, I'm not allowed on Facebook. I could not defend against this in any manner, shape, or form. I couldn't object. I couldn't go to Facebook's management. I couldn't do anything because I'm not allowed on Facebook. Facebook has, and all their subsidiary companies, Instagram and everything else that they've bought up, and then a lot of companies have actually started adopting this policy as well, will not allow sex offenders on their sites. Now, the theory behind it, I imagine, is, because the public perceptions of sex offenders are all stalkers and dangerous people and everything else, and they're out there. They're going to use these social platforms to look for little kids, look for people, victimize them, etc., etc. And there are certain people who that certainly fits, but that's what a government is for. That is what supervision is for. That's what restraint is for inside sentencing guidelines. And again, I still have to go back to this and talk about this in another podcast, but there's something called nexus to the crime. And that is to say that the government is only legally allowed to restrict your behavior, your conduct, if it actually has something related to the crime. If you don't drink in the commission of a crime, they can't bar you from alcohol. If there's no gambling involved, they can't bar you from gambling. If there's no social media component to a crime, they can't ban you from social media. They can't ban you from the internet. They can't ban you from any place. There has to be something related to the internet or something else for them to legally ban you. Facebook has taken the concept all by themselves and said, we're going to go ahead and do what governments won't do. We're going to ban sex offenders. Not because, and keep in mind, sex offender is a very broad topic. It's not just somebody who goes out and picks up a 3-year-old from a school playground and takes her into the woods and has his way with her for 2 months before he gets found, or horrifically, something happens to the child. But, I mean, urinating in an alley, congratulations, you're a sex offender. You exposed yourself in public. You're a sex offender. Congratulations. You're 18, you're dating a 16-year-old in school, and that's against the law in your state. Congratulations, you're a sex offender. The broad range of what is termed sex offender is so overly broad. It's insane. And if my case is any example, not everybody out there who has branded this is actually a sex offender. They're just people who've been categorized and lumped into this category because it's an easy thing to vilify. Once again, propaganda, ladies and gentlemen. Taking a very broad and complex topic and narrowing it down into the word sex offender. I mean, there are people, I know a guy who I was in a treatment group with who, keep in mind, in Montana, state of Montana, age of consent is 16, which means legally a 50-year-old can date a 16-year-old. Personally, I haven't had an interest in 16-year-olds since I was, in high school. And I've always said I don't want to date anyone under 21 because at the time I was going to bars, I wasn't drinking, I was singing karaoke, shooting pool, that kind of stuff. And I wanted a girlfriend I could socialize with in a public place where I went. So anyone under the age of 21 simply wasn't someone I was interested in because they couldn't share activities with. But nevertheless, in Montana, age of consent is 16. I was in a group with a guy who was 18, who was dating a 16-year-old. Her parents objected. He was arrested. He didn't commit a crime under Montana. But they arrested him, they put him in jail, and they badgered him until they took a plea deal and pled guilty to sexual assault, even though he didn't commit a crime. Because in Montana, she was of legal age. Misinformation, propaganda. Let's go ahead and brand this guy for the rest of his life, call him a sex offender. Now he's going to be, his life abilities, his ability to ascend in society, his ability to get higher paying jobs, just the felon conviction alone is an issue, but sex offender is even worse. Because you take a very complex issue, and you narrow it down, and you now have a term that vilifies everybody, regardless of the level of offense. I'm not saying there aren't some genuinely, being politically correct, disturbed people out there. I'm not saying there's not. I'm not saying there's not, parents who have incest with their children. I'm saying there are some genuine sex offenders out there. I'm not saying by any mention of stretch of the imagination that sex offenders, whatever category they fall into, that they're not genuinely perverted people who do use social media platforms to stalk and to get girls or victims, whatever their category is. But that's not even the majority of people who are on the sex offender roster. There are most people who are sex offenders, who are classified as a sex offender, are not people who've gone online, stalked people online, or anything else. Because most people who are on the registry, and by the way, you're on the registry for your entire life, so remember that. If you're 60 years old now, and you committed your crime when you were 20, that was 40 years ago, and that was long before there was an internet. So there are people who've never been on social media prior to their conviction, never been on the internet prior to their conviction, who are lumped into this category. Again, complex issue, narrowed down into a soundbite. an offensive soundbite. And I don't even like the word saying it. I mean, I say the word sex offender, and even I feel the negative connotations of those words gather, because that's what my brain has been trained to do my entire life. And it's just, even after having gone through this on the bad side myself since 2003, I still feel the negative connotations with that word, even knowing and understanding that it's a much broader concept than what the general public is permitted to perceive it as. It is an incredibly difficult issue when propaganda is allowed to change and manipulate people's thinking. But anyway, I was doing book signings at the mall. All this was going on, and for 3 days, I could do nothing. And they started the most horrific stories. None of them were true. One person said I had put some kind of a spyware on his underage niece's phone, and I was tracking her location. I mean, some of the things were just bizarre. About as bizarre as me making, dirty phone calls to random girls in Plainville, Kansas, 1,200 miles away. I mean, it made no sense. It took 3 days for Facebook to finally acknowledge that this was I received death threats. I was being sent screenshots from friends. You need to be careful because this. You need to be careful because of this. And my friend Gene logged on, and the thread was thousands of posts, making up all these horrific stories and all these horrific things, all trying to stop me from doing book signings in the mall. Because Mara didn't want me to be successful. And when I brought the complaint to the police, look, my life is being threatened. This is malicious slander. This is malicious libel. This is malicious defamation. These people are threatening me with hate crimes. They did nothing. Well, the only thing we can do is if something does happen to you, let us know. Oh, so if I'm dead, please, I'll rise from the grave and tell you. If something happens, to let me know. Now, I guarantee if I threaten someone, if I said, Jim Bob, let's bring Jim Bob. We haven't brought in Jim Bob yet this episode. If I say, hey, Jim Bob, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to come over to your house, and I'm going to use a shotgun so it makes sure it leaves nothing left of your dinner bag. Your body's not going to be the most horrific thing I could think of. I'm going to go to jail, ladies and gentlemen. I guarantee it. I will go to jail. Because I'm not allowed to do those kind of things. But anybody can threaten to curb stomp me, drive-by shoot me. Next time they see me in the mall, I'm not going to leave the mall. I mean, they can say whatever they want. And guess what? Facebook actually records all of this stuff. People have to use verified accounts. They have multiple accounts. Let's face it, people create multiple accounts and oftentimes fake identities. But a lot of them are using their real names and their real photographs, and they are traceable, and people know who they are. This is not an anonymous process in all cases. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. There it is. It's perfectly, legitimately prosecutable crimes. But because I'm the victim, because I'm the one who's actually being assaulted, threatened, terrorized, it's allowable. And it's something I talked about on my blog as allowable misconduct, or permissible misconduct, I've often called it. It allows people to do whatever crime they want to, so long as I'm the victim. My cars have been vandalized half a dozen times. I've reported it 4 times. 4 times. Police have never done a darn thing. Even when I've known exactly who's done it, I can point a finger and say, okay, the last time someone cut the power steering line on my van. It was pretty obvious. They clipped it and they bent it back. It was just no way this was accidental. It was obviously clipped. It's a metal line, for those who don't realize it. So it was clipped. Both ends were pinched in, and then one end was pinched back as whoever was using their clippers just twisted it back. Very obvious. I had just got that van a couple months before. My ex-girlfriend Mara and her group of cronies out there didn't know I was driving it. Didn't know I had changed vehicles. They had sabotaged my last one. Somebody had actually sabotaged my transmission. They'd gone under the car and and gouged in the edge of the seal to where it was leaking. And I didn't realize this until actually I took it apart to try to fix it. And I realized, hey, wait a minute, this, I can see the cuts. I can see where this has been cut back and pushed back in. There's no other way than an outside instrument pushing in and doing this until it punctured the seal. And by the time I realized that my transmission was leaking like a sieve and I was able to try to fix it, the transmission just burned out. So I had to replace the car. But the day before I got cut, one of her friends saw me at a coffee shop, and I saw him, and I'm like, I gotta get out of here before he sees me. I don't want him to see me. I don't want him to see my van. I knew I didn't want this van to be vandalized. I just had my car destroyed by vandalism. But he saw me, and I couldn't, and the very next day, it's destroyed. The power steering. Now, keep in mind, the power steering was fixable. I was able to replace the wire, the line, and everything else. But it is what it is. Allow misconduct. Even when I can trace and say these people are responsible. This person saw me in the van one day, this happened the next day. I know he's responsible, go talk to him. They don't care. I'm the victim, it's allowable. Keep heaping the abuse on Mr. Glick because Mr. Glick's not protected in any manner, shape, or form. Why? Because they've run this propaganda idea that I'm this horrific person who deserves to be punished, and I've somehow escaped consequence all this time. And as a consequence, the people are allowed to do whatever they want to me. The bottom line here, and I'm trying to wrap this up because I just realized this has been going on for quite a while. And this is a very emotional issue for me, so it's a lot less structured than my previous podcasts. But anyone, whether it be government or anyone else, is given free rein to spread lies without consequence, there can be no justice. There never is. If government is not accountable for lying, if they're not bound by any measure of law that says they must be truthful, and you would think in a democracy that would be a prerequisite to government. You must be honest. You must tell the truth. You are representing the people. You cannot lie to the people you are representing. And yet, here we are. We can't have justice. We can't have any kind of a true democracy of any kind if a government is above reproach. Anytime anyone is above the law, there's no justice, there's no democracy. And that's what we have here. We have a situation, a circumstance where misinformation is not only allowed, it's encouraged, it's rewarded. People build careers on lies. I did an entire discussion on Barry Beach and former Governor Mark Roscoe, and about how he didn't care how all the lies and misinformation he was providing, just so long as he got Barry Beach prosecuted. He didn't care if Barry Beach was guilty. He had to have known, honestly, that Barry Beach wasn't guilty. He didn't care. He wanted to have a murder prosecution. He wanted to put it in his jacket, and he wanted to use that jacket to advance his political career. But the same thing going on in Flathead County right now, with a couple of cases. People don't care whether it's true. And the government faces no consequences. These people in the government is a more accurate statement. These people, whether they be elected or appointed, they face no consequence for lying. They're not required to tell the truth. They're allowed to fabricate, they're allowed to exaggerate, and it doesn't just extend to prosecutions because they can go out into the community, whether it be through the media, or whether it be through phone conversations, or just talking to people and spreading information. They can interview people and tell people the most horrific lies, and there's no consequence. They don't go to jail. There's no penalty. They don't lose their jobs. They don't even pay a fine. A police officer can walk up to you and lie to you. A judge can lie to you The President of the United States can lie to you, and there's no legal consequence. There's no legal consequence for lying and misrepresenting to you. If you lie to any of those people, you go to jail, potentially, because it's a crime. And so long as this incredible imbalance exists, it simply allows for corruption, and it allows for the Great Montana Conspiracy to remain in power. Because there's no consequences to these people. These are not only encouraged, they're benefited, they're rewarded. They get to go on with their lives. If a prosecutor says, you committed a crime, okay, let's say Jim Bob committed murder. We're going to bring Jim Bob in again. Jim Bob, I'm going to accuse you of murder. I know you didn't do it. I'm just looking for a scapegoat. But I'm going to say you committed murder. And I'm going to drag your life through. I'm going to spend the next 18 months defending against this. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your savings. You're going to lose everything. And by the time I'm done, whether I win or lose, you're going to have lost everything. I don't care. You can spend 18 months in jail, get bonded out under $500,000 bond, whatever. I don't care. The prosecutor's not going to face any penalty. Even if he fails in the prosecution, even if Jim Bob proves his innocence and walks away from the prosecution, the prosecutor himself faces no consequence. He doesn't face a loss in salary. He doesn't face a loss of anything. The best he can do is if he can succeed in going to court and getting a false arrest or malicious prosecution charge grounded in court. And if you have a corrupt judiciary who's protecting these prosecutors, that's never going to happen. Well, once again, welcome to the corrupt government. Well, I've certainly rambled on long enough tonight, and I apologize. This had actually been intended to be a very short conversation, but this ended up being much longer than I actually intended because, again, very emotional for me, and therefore I'm kind of rambling a bit on different subjects, and I'm bouncing around, and I apologize for that. I do hope this has been informative, and I do hope this gives you some insight into things that and how it affects individuals like myself. I'm not the only person out here, and I hope that other people will come forward and speak. But in the meantime, if you do like this podcast and you think that what I say has value, please by all means share it. Go to my YouTube channel, follow my channel, like the videos, share the links, get people behind this, because the more information we get out there, the more people who are exposed to the truth, the more chances we have of affecting change. Ultimately, my goal, as I've mentioned in the past, is to set up a nonprofit for the very express purpose of challenging government. Challenging these very things that I'm talking about in these podcasts. But to do that, I need resources, and I don't have them. As I've mentioned before, I'm using an iPhone 8 to record these videos. I do not have a sophisticated sound system. I don't have a studio. I don't have the ability to have dual screens where I can pop in a lot of these things that I'm talking about, because I just don't have the ability. I don't have the money, the resources. I've been forced to live my life on disability, very fixed income. I've been trying to use my books for some time to get off that disability. It hasn't been successful. And obviously no one has given me $100 million to do what I do. So therefore I have to do what's uncomfortable for me, which is to ask for support. And I do hope that you will consider that. If you have resources, if you have extra, whether it be sound equipment, or you have resources, experience, or background into various areas of expertise of subjects of which I'm talking on, by all means share that information. If you're incarcerated, if you're under supervision, obviously I cannot speak with you directly, but that's what my friend Bill Russell is for, and his contact information is in the or should be attached to this video. If not, please go to Podbean, monspiracy.podbean.com, which is where the original podcast originates. The information will be there. It should also be attached to my YouTube videos. I can't speak for whoever else picks this up, or they'll carry the full summary of my episodes. I hope they will, and I hope this information is attached. Financial donations, material donations can of course be sent to me. If you have any kind of desire to help me, you can do it through purchase of my books online. Obviously, any purchases of my autobiography, which is the U.S. Political Prisoners since 2004 book, those go towards spreading information already. It's right now being channeled, any and all resources being from those publications are being channeled to supporting this podcast. But if there's any other books of my books, I've written 24 books. I published 24 books. Only one of them is my autobiography. So if there's any of the other books that you say, hey, I want to read this book, but I want to make sure the money goes to the podcast, contact me. I'll divert the money. Not a problem. It's easy to do. It's just, okay, that one sale is going to go towards this podcast. I don't earn a lot of money through my books. Most of the time it just goes towards making print copies so I can give them out and try to, through promotions, trying to raise awareness of my books. It certainly isn't a way to earn income, and it's certainly not a profit. It just goes, it's not hard to redirect $1 or $2 or 20 or 30 or 50 and put it to this podcast instead of making more print books to give away. And by the way, I'm not at all being accurate. Never once received $50 in a single month's payment for my books. So that's just an exaggeration. But anyway, I do hope that you enjoy this podcast, and I apologize once again that this has been so across the board, sweepingly. But as I said, this is an emotional issue. It's kind of captured my thinking for the last couple of days, and therefore it's been something that I have to say, okay, I need to do something about this. One other thing before I sign off. The another thing that came up that needs to be brought up. It never fails, and whenever I try to post information, there's people out here who deliberately will post disseminating information. They'll post negative information. They'll post negative reviews. They'll hit the unlike button, the thumbs down button, just to make sure that the distribution is affected. They don't want this information out there. And unfortunately, that has gravitated to YouTube. Someone is actively out there, whether one person, a group of people, whatever, are actively out there deliberately going through every single video of mine and hitting the down button just to lower the distribution ratio, because YouTube does have the higher the percentage the likes are, the more it distributes it to random people, and the lower it is, obviously the less likes, and therefore YouTube doesn't distribute it or make it available randomly as much. Consequently, it was expected. It's begun to happen. Please understand that when you're watching this, if there are not a lot of people watching, it's because random people are not being filtered to this, because people are out there deliberately trying to sabotage the distribution of this message. Don't let them succeed. Bring your friends in. If everybody brings in 10, and then their friends bring in 10, and then they bring in 10, this is going to go pretty far. But we have to get that motivation, and we have to overcome the people who don't want you to have this information. So, once again, I thank you for your time, and whenever possible, please be safe. Good night.